Book is my hard truth. All those experiences, when you read the book, you get hard truth at the hard truth at the hard truth. Starting to understand how people go, oh, he said this, he said that.
Right.
I'm just not the type of person to put my personal life. It's not for the media.
For years, Rich Paul said almost nothing. While rumors about his relationship with Adele circulated across social media and entertainment headlines, he stayed completely out of the conversation, refusing to confirm, deny, or explain anything about his private life. That silence only made the speculation grow louder. Then, on June 9th, 2025, everything changed as he finally broke the silence. So what finally made Rich Paul break his silence? And what did he reveal that completely reframed how people see his relationship with Adele? Join us as we uncover Rich Paul's first public words about Adele. The circles that converged. Rich Paul is a man accustomed to exclusive circles. As the founder of Clutch Sports Group and the agent for some of basketball's biggest stars, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, Aja Wilson, and Tyrese Maxey, he operates in a world of wealth, power, and influence that few people ever penetrate. His business is built on relationships with the most accomplished athletes in the world. His reputation is everything, and his discretion is paramount. But that's not the only exclusive circle Rich moves through. At 44 years old, having worked in the sports and entertainment industries for decades, he finds himself in the orbit of entertainers, celebrities, business leaders, and other figures of significant wealth and influence. These are the circles that define high-level society in America and beyond, the people who attend the same events, the same parties, the same exclusive gatherings. They're the circles where a person like Adele would naturally move as one of the world's most successful and celebrated musicians. So when Rich Paul sat down with Craig Melvin on the Glass Half Full podcast to discuss how he and Adele met, his explanation was disarmingly simple. They met through a friend in these overlapping circles. But what made his explanation more revealing was what came next. A philosophy about how he approaches relationships within these shared social spaces. On the podcast, Rich explained that he had known her for some time and that they moved in the same circles. But he never tried to get too close with people who are in comfortable circles because they always have to deal with that. So that was never his thing. Rich Paul had decided, long before he ever thought romantically about Adele, that he wouldn't be the person to poison that circle. He wouldn't be the person who created discomfort in the spaces they shared. But respecting boundaries and maintaining distance doesn't mean two people can't develop a connection in that space, especially when they keep seeing each other, laughing together, and enjoying each other's company. So, if Rich truly didn't want to be the source of any discomfort, how did he eventually navigate the situation and get Adele in his corner? From cordial to something more. In his podcast appearance, Rich Paul made a distinction about how his relationship with Adele evolved. We just used to always see each other, laugh and joke. It was just cordial, really, just cordial. Until it became not so cordial. Until I became a person of interest. During the process of not trying to complicate things, they developed a comfort with each other. And then, slowly, something changed. The cordial relationship began to transform into something with romantic potential. When he talked about the transition from friendship to romance, he emphasized that it was really something that happened very organically, really. Unlike relationships that begin with immediate attraction and rapid escalation, Rich and Adele's connection was gradually built on a foundation of genuine friendship and comfortable companionship. They both established the fact that they actually enjoyed being around one another, beyond any surface-level attraction. And crucially, Rich maintained his philosophy of respect throughout this transition. He didn't get fresh as the relationship shifted. He didn't suddenly make inappropriate moves or create pressure. Instead, the relationship evolved naturally, with both parties understanding what was happening and moving into it together. Years later, Adele described meeting Rich with similar language of organic coincidence. She recalled that they first connected at a party years before going public, when she joked to him while a bit drunk, "Do you want to sign me? I'm an athlete now." She laughed about the encounter. He had made an impression through his dancing, his energy, and his presence, not through any calculated romantic move. But the years between that initial meeting and when they actually went public as a couple were filled with something crucial. What exactly went down within those years? The silent years before the world knew. When Rich and Adele finally went public with their relationship in July 2021 at Game 5 of the NBA Finals in Phoenix, where the Milwaukee Bucks defeated the Phoenix Suns, it seemed to come out of nowhere to the public. Suddenly, here was Adele, the notoriously private singer who had been through a divorce and had spent years focusing on her children and her music, out at a basketball game with an unfamiliar man beside her. But the public debut wasn't the beginning of their relationship. It was simply the moment they decided they no longer cared about keeping it private. According to Rich Paul's recent podcast appearance, they had known each other for years before this moment. They had spent time together in those exclusive circles. What this means is that Rich and Adele had built their relationship entirely outside of public scrutiny, away from cameras, away from social media, away from the machinery of celebrity gossip. They had done what very few people in their position managed to do: maintain privacy in a relationship between two globally famous figures. The significance of this is quite obvious. Adele is one of the most famous singers in the world. Her life is constantly scrutinized. Her relationships are tabloid fodder. Every appearance she makes and every social media post she shares generate millions of views and intense speculation. And yet, somehow, she and Rich Paul had managed to keep their relationship entirely private as it formed. This speaks to a deliberate choice on both their parts. Neither of them was publicizing their connection. Neither of them was using the relationship as fodder for tabloid headlines or social media content. They were simply existing in their private sphere, building something real away from the world's gaze. When Rich explained on the podcast that their connection happened very organically, part of what he was describing was this privacy. There was no calculated timing. There was no announcement strategy. There were just two people in shared social circles, gradually moving from friendship to something more and keeping it entirely to themselves. But keeping something private in the age of social media and constant surveillance is nearly impossible. And eventually, the world caught up to their secret. So, how did the world react? The public emergence and the speculation machine. When Adele and Rich Paul went public in July 2021, the internet erupted with immediate questions and speculation. Who was this man? Where did he come from? How long had they been dating? What did this mean for Adele's future? Rather than retreat after being exposed, Adele leaned into transparency, but on her own terms. In interviews with Vogue and British Vogue in October 2021, she opened up about meeting Rich and how she felt about him. She didn't try to hide the relationship or minimize its significance, but she also didn't provide a detailed timeline or explain every aspect of their connection. Rich just incredibly arrived, she told Vogue, describing how his presence in her life had felt. I don't feel anxious or nervous or frazzled. It's quite the opposite. It's wild. She described him as so fucking funny and so smart. She made clear that this relationship felt different from her previous experiences, that it felt stable and grounded in a way that had surprised her. What Adele described, aligned perfectly with what Rich later revealed on the Glass Half Full podcast. This relationship had developed slowly and organically, without pressure or performance. When Adele said Rich incredibly arrived, she wasn't describing a sudden romantic intervention. She was describing someone who had been present for years, gradually becoming more central to her life. But almost immediately after they went public, speculation intensified. Throughout 2021 and 2022, there were rumors that they had broken up, that their relationship was on shaky ground, and that Adele was trying to save the relationship. Some reports claimed that Adele had canceled her Las Vegas residency because of relationship problems. Others speculated about the real reason they had broken up. Each time these rumors surfaced, Adele responded with humor and dismissiveness, making indirect references to Rich in Instagram posts or shutting down speculation with brief comments. It was obvious that she wasn't interested in engaging with the endless cycle of rumor and counter-rumor. She had built her relationship in private. She wasn't going to let the public dissect it endlessly. And Rich? He stayed silent. Completely silent. While Adele occasionally addressed rumors, Rich refused to engage with the speculation at all. He didn't give interviews about his relationship. He didn't post on social media about Adele. He maintained the privacy they had agreed to protect, even as the outside world demanded transparency and explanation. This silence lasted for years, through multiple breakup rumors, speculation, and the entire early phase of their public relationship. Rich Paul simply refused to speak about it. Until June 2025, when he finally decided the time had come to set the record straight. Breaking 4 years of silence on the Glass Half Full podcast. On June 9th, 2025, Rich Paul sat down with Craig Melvin for an episode of the Glass Half Full podcast that would turn out to be the most open he had ever been about his relationship with Adele. But what makes this conversation significant isn't that he revealed shocking secrets or dramatic revelations. What's significant is that he chose to speak at all and what he chose to emphasize. Rather than discussing any conflict or drama, Rich focused on explaining the unclear meaning that has led to speculations and the reality of how their relationship actually works. He talked about meeting her through friends. He talked about the years he had known her before romance entered the picture. He talked about his deliberate choice not to get fresh with people in shared social circles. He talked about how their connection happened organically, through genuine friendship and repeated encounters. In doing so, he was making a clear statement about what their relationship is and isn't. It's not a calculated celebrity pairing created for publicity. It's not the result of a famous person deciding to date another famous person for headlines. It's a genuine connection between two people who moved in the same circles, developed a real friendship, and gradually discovered romantic feelings for each other. When Rich admitted on the podcast that he wasn't initially familiar with Adele's music, that he hadn't actively followed her career before they connected, he was making another important point. He wasn't impressed by her fame or interested in her because of her celebrity. He was interested in her as a person he had come to know and appreciate in their shared social circles. Interestingly, Rich also mentioned on the podcast that he joked about being the best singer in the house. This speaks to a relationship in which they can laugh at the absurdity of their situation rather than be weighed down by it. By the time Rich Paul sat down for this podcast in June 2025, their relationship had already achieved something extraordinary. It had survived 4 years of public scrutiny, multiple breakup rumors, intense speculation, and the endless pressure that comes with being a famous couple. And yet, for all the rumors, speculation, and constant public attention, the relationship had already crossed a threshold that changed it into something more permanent. By the time Rich Paul finally spoke publicly in 2025, The story was no longer about whether they would last. It was about how they had already outlasted the noise surrounding them. A life beyond the headlines. On that same podcast, Rich revealed something that got fans super excited and finally silenced the negative speculations. His relationship with Adele had already reached a significant milestone: engagement. In August 2024, while performing at a concert in Munich, Germany, Adele revealed to a fan in the crowd that she was engaged, saying, "I can't marry you because I'm already getting married." Adele didn't announce the engagement with a social media post showing off a ring. She didn't give an exclusive interview to a magazine. She simply told a fan at a concert, in a moment of genuine, unguarded joy. The news spread from there, through the internet's rumor mill and fan communities. But the announcement itself was authentically Adele. A moment of personal joy shared with a fan, not a calculated publicity move. What eventually emerged from Rich Paul's podcast appearance is a portrait of a relationship that operates according to principles rarely seen in celebrity culture. Both Rich and Adele seem committed to maintaining genuine privacy. They're not documenting their relationship on social media or giving detailed interviews about their intimate life. They're simply living their lives, occasionally appearing together at basketball games or at major events, but fundamentally keeping their relationship a private matter. As of June 2025, when Rich made his podcast appearance, he was 44 years old, and Adele was 36. They were no longer young people new to relationships or fame. They were accomplished, successful people in their prime, who had built their lives on their own terms. Their relationship reflects maturity, comfort with privacy, a lack of need to prove anything to the world, and the confidence that comes from having achieved everything you want to achieve, both professionally and personally. What Rich Paul's breaking of the silence ultimately revealed is that the internet had been getting the story wrong for years. It wasn't a dramatic celebrity romance full of conflict and tension. It wasn't a relationship under constant threat of collapse. It was simply two people who had known each other for years, had gradually developed romantic feelings for each other, had maintained their privacy and dignity throughout the process, and had decided to move deeper into their commitment together. The breakup rumors that had circulated endlessly weren't based on any credible reporting. They were based on speculation about why two people weren't constantly photographed together, why they didn't post about each other on social media constantly, and why they maintained privacy in a world that demands transparency. In the age of Instagram and TikTok, where relationships are often performed for an audience, Rich and Adele's insistence on privacy was read as suspicious. But as Rich explained on the Glass Half Full podcast, their privacy wasn't a sign of trouble. It was a deliberate choice, rooted in respect and a mature understanding of what a real relationship requires. But before this relationship that looks like a perfect match, love had not been kind to Adele. Inside the end of a private marriage. Before she found love with Rich Paul, Adele's most famous long-term relationship was with philanthropist Simon Konecki, a partnership that eventually led to marriage, a child, and later a private but closely followed divorce. Adele and Simon Konecki first met in 2011, at a turning point in her career, as she was becoming famous following the success of her breakthrough album, 21. At the time, Adele was transitioning from emerging British vocalist to international superstar, while Simon maintained a life largely outside the entertainment industry. Their relationship developed quietly, away from the constant media attention that followed her career. They got married, and in 2012, they welcomed their son, Angelo, a major milestone for both. Despite Adele's rising fame, the couple largely avoided public discussion of their relationship, keeping details of their life together out of interviews and press coverage. The only thing her fans could do was speculate, because there was no public announcement. Then, in 2017, Adele finally confirmed their marriage publicly when she referred to Simon as her husband during her Grammy Awards acceptance speech. The confirmation came as a surprise to many fans, as the couple had not previously announced a wedding or shared details of the ceremony. But just a few years after the public confirmation of their love, things went sideways. In 2019, Adele filed for divorce in Los Angeles Superior Court, several months after representatives confirmed the couple had separated. A statement released at the time emphasized that the decision was mutual and that both parties remained committed to co-parenting their son. There was no toxic back and forth, and it was definitely not a high-profile divorce. Simon, founder of the nonprofit Drop for Drop, has remained focused on philanthropic work and has largely stayed outside the entertainment spotlight. Adele, meanwhile, continued her career while stepping back from public visibility at various points, balancing global fame with personal transitions. The divorce proceedings themselves remained relatively low profile compared to many celebrity separations, with no public disputes or legal battles dominating headlines. Instead, the process unfolded quietly until the final agreement was reached and formalized. Their co-parenting arrangement has been without dispute and has ensured that both parents remain actively involved in their child's upbringing. As part of the settlement, neither Adele nor Simon will receive spousal support, and Adele will not be required to pay child support. The financial terms were handled privately, outside of public dispute or courtroom conflict. Adele might have taken her time before seeking love, but when the time was right, it found her. Did Rich Paul's podcast appearance finally put to rest years of breakup rumors? Or will the internet continue to speculate about celebrities who refuse to make their relationships public? Should couples like Adele and Rich Paul feel obligated to share more about their personal lives with the audiences that support their careers? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.